If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who might you ask? I'm the Wiz, and I'm here today with...
Zero.
How you doing this week?
A little bit miserable. Dealing with an eye infection, so just not feeling too great.
So we are here to review the 1971 adventure drama Walkabout, starring Jenny Agutter, Luke Roeg, and David Gallipoli. Oh my god, I think I butchered all three of those names. Directed by Nicolas Roeg. Zero, let me ask you something. When it comes to survival movies, is there certain ones that pop up into your head that you enjoyed?
There was one that I enjoyed, but it's a little bit on the darker side, and that would be the Japanese movie Battle Royale. That one is a little bit on the grisly side, but it is an excellent but gory movie.
That is one movie I definitely want to see. I haven't gotten around to it. I think I bought it for like $5 on Apple TV, and I've never watched it, so I gotta check that out. Let's get into the review of Walkabout, directed by Nicolas Roeg. Before that, let's get into the plot. This movie is pretty simple. It's about two kids who go on a picnic with their father, but their father decides at the picnic to try and kill them by shooting at them. When he fails, he shoots himself, and the kids have to go into the desert to find a way to survive. They do come across an Aboriginal boy, and they find a way to survive out in the desert. All right, so before we get to the review, we will be spoiling the movie, so if you have not seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, you can go ahead and skip to the footnotes or to whether we recommend it or not.
There is kind of an element of adaptability in everything, especially when you have the younger boy of the two city kids trying to make an active effort to learn how to communicate with the Aboriginal boy, and yet the girl makes no effort in trying to learn how to communicate with the Aboriginal boy, even though just she realizes that her survival kind of depends on the Aboriginal boy to basically be able to help her and everything. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic seeing the younger boy just making an active effort to try to learn how to communicate with the Aboriginal boy. And in essence, he ends up acting as an interpreter for his big sister.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's get into the first point that I would talk about with this movie, and that is this is a film about friendship through cultural clash. It's funny that you actually mentioned the thing between two boys in this movie, because it's just one of those things that makes this film interesting. Because there is a friendship and more element to this movie between the boy and the girl and the Aborigine boy, but it's due to a lack of communication where they can't really actually discuss their feelings on it, and that leads to certain things that happen in the movie. But I thought that was definitely an interesting thing about the movie.
You kind of see sort of like the interesting journey that they take to try to survive in the desert before they bump into the Aboriginal boy and everything. The boy kind of seems to initially think of the whole excursion as kind of like just sort of a fun little misadventure, but the sister seems to kind of try to be stoic through the whole thing by kind of not telling him the truth about what happened to their father for most of the movie. And it's actually kind of interesting and ironic by the end, because the boy kind of goes, "Dad's dead, isn't he?"
That is right. Another interesting thing, the highlight there, Zero, because I think the film, in regards to what the film is actually about, it's about the maturation of a girl turning into a woman. And it's interesting because in the beginning of the movie, you don't really see any kind of maturation with the girl, but as the film goes on, especially when the father attacks the two kids, she steps up in a big way. And it is a lot like growing up into an adult, where you're not told specifically when you have to do it or when exactly is the right time to reach that plateau. The movie, it basically acts like that, where she had to step up immediately and become a motherly figure, a protector of sorts for her child, or her brother, but of a child, and she was able to do it. And I think in a lot of ways this movie is about her maturation into a woman. Not only in that aspect, not only as a protector, but I think one of the most interesting things about the movie is about her blossoming sexuality as well. There are scenes in the movie, especially with her and the Aboriginal boy, where she is leering at him. She's staring at him and has this look of confusion yet infatuation, that it seems like she is attracted to him, not even in a way, but very much attracted to him. And it would also make sense because he's also become their protector.
It's kind of an interesting dynamic there. It kind of goes in a weird way as well, too, because there is one part where the Aboriginal boy kind of runs into her while she's completely naked,
Hmm.
and she realizes that he's looking at her, so she has kind of her Western sensibilities and covers up just out of shame and everything. The Aboriginal boy sees this as kind of like, I guess, kind of a sign that she seems like the ideal mate for him. So he ends up doing an Aboriginal sort of mating dance to try to win her affections over. And he just keeps trying and trying through the night and everything. This kind of ends up leading to a tragic end because her brother gets back from kind of running an errand and everything, and she kind of makes a hasty mention of, hey, we're leaving this abandoned house to try to find our way back to civilization by morning.
Yeah.
No ifs or ands or buts. We gotta go. They kind of find an ironic end to the Aboriginal boy. Just he ends up hanging himself at the end of it. It's kind of an interesting sort of change on the dynamic because just it seemed like the Aboriginal boy and the girl were sort of being pulled together just by fate and circumstance, and then you have this whole failed mating dance scenario that happens, and it just isn't meant to be.
Which goes into the culture clash aspect, because I think if they could both communicate effectively to each other, I think they would both find that they were both attracted to each other, but just because of their cultures, it was impossible to bridge that gap as well. I guess the question I would have to ask you is this, now that we have spoiled that entire ending. Do you think that's the only reason why he killed himself?
Unfortunately, it's just hard to tell, at least in my mind. The movie, unfortunately, leaves a lot to kind of be inferred by the viewer. My interpretation is maybe this was kind of his sort of journey to adulthood, and well, just to kind of complete his journey to adulthood, he needs to find a woman to be his mate and to essentially help him sire a family. And by failing that objective, he felt like possibly he couldn't complete his journey to adulthood, so the only way to cap off the failure is to basically just to take his own life. At least that's what I inferred from it, but that's just my personal interpretation. The movie doesn't really quite spell it out, so there could be just any number of interpretations.
I agree that a part of it had to do with the failed mating dance. I do agree with that point, but I also think it had a lot to do as well with the fact that before the hanging happened, there are scenes where he is noticing hunters starting to kill certain animals that he hunts, and certain things are happening in his environment that are literally pushing him out. And I looked at that as the encroaching invasion of nature by modern life. That basically his way of life is going to come to an end. He just feels this kind of doom and gloom. I guess her rejecting him was like the straw that broke the camel's back, which led to him to do what he did in that end.
And that's very much a fair interpretation as well, too, especially just when you get to the scene of just the hunters sort of just shooting down animals left and right without a care. And these hunters were just hunting for sport. They weren't hunting to survive, kind of like what the Aboriginal boy was doing. It's like the one scene where he hunts a kangaroo to basically have meat for both the girl and the younger boy. He was hunting animals to find sustenance, whereas these hunters that were sort of just joyriding around in the Australian wilderness were sort of just shooting animals just for sport and not even collecting the animals at all. Some of these animals were just kind of shot and just left to rot in the wild.
And then the other imagery that you see is different types of animals being eaten by worms and maggots and stuff that really shows a natural decay. What I also will say, though, just to get out of the themes as well, because I think this is a very richly themed movie, I think the way the film looks is actually very well done. The natural vistas that are in the movie, I think, are shot very well. I think they're shot in a way to make them seem threatening and to make them seem scary to a certain extent.
Yeah, the photography compositions for a lot of the settings and everything are just really, really well composed, and they sort of kind of give you the feeling of desolation in some ways. And then in some other scenes where you have sort of just a desert spring, sometimes the desert spring moments are kind of like real, drawn in, close and intimate, and kind of giving like a sense of relief from all the desolation that you see in some of the other scenes. It's a very, very well visually composed movie.
No, absolutely. All right, Zero, so let's get to the footnotes for Walkabout. Zero, what do you have for me?
When I was doing some supplemental research on this movie after watching it, I ended up finding out that this was actually based on a novel of the same name that was published back in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
And from what little I read of it, the start of the movie is completely different.
Really? So what do they change from the novel?
In the novel, how it starts off is you have two American kids.
Oh, it's American.
Yeah, they basically end up stranded in the Australian outback after their plane crashes. And one of the kids ends up saying that they should try to find their uncle who lives out in Adelaide, but they don't realize that Adelaide is on the other side of Australia. I was just like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's quite a different start than some kids just being brought out to the Australian wilderness under the guise of a picnic to be murdered.
Yeah, but I wonder if the themes from the book are wildly different from the movie as well, because it just seems like they took the concept and just said, and Nicolas Roeg just said, oh, okay, that's all cool and all. I like the concept, but here's what I got. And at that point, it would have been like, well, why base it off of a novel at that point? But
I just kind of thought it was interesting just that this movie was based on a novel.
Yeah.
And just trying to glean some details from it, I was like, wow, that starting scene is completely different from how the movie has it start off.
Yeah, I wonder how much more of it is different from the novel. All right, Zero, so do you recommend Walkabout?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting as a movie, especially with sort of the juxtaposition between ancient civilization and modern day culture just clashing together. And the photography for some of the settings is just amazing in just kind of trying to evoke a feeling out of the viewers, especially when you have the real wide shots of the desolate desert and just trying to give you a sense of despair for these kids just journeying through a hot desert. And then when you get to kind of like these scenes where things are a little bit nicer, like when they find one of the desert oases, it just kind of tightens in and you get kind of a more intimate feeling that they found some peace, they found some respite, even if it's short. And it's just a very, very interesting use of the photography composition with regards to the camera work.
Yeah, this definitely is a beautiful movie, and I also recommend it. It's funny that you chose the theme of the juxtaposition between modern and natural life as your main thing, as my main thing was the maturation of the main female character. I thought that was the more fascinating thing about this movie. But I do have to agree, like, those aspects as well are very interesting. Now that you mentioned the novel and the differences it has, I'm actually kind of curious as to what the differences are between the book and the movie, and to see what they changed and why in there. But I actually really like this movie. So, Zero, do you recommend Walkabout?
Yes, I do.
And I also recommend Walkabout. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at iamthewiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. All right, so for Saturday, I'll be reviewing Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Tuesday will be Tokyo Story, directed by Yasujiro Ozu. Thursday, Zero, what are we watching next?
The 1971 movie A Touch of Zen.
Ah, yes. A Touch of Zen, directed by King Hu. I didn't hear much about this, but I read a little bit of it earlier. And this is basically, I guess, Crouching Tiger before Crouching Tiger? Is that what it sounds like to you?
Sort of. It's a story that's based on a very old play from the olden days, and the Chinese title actually translates to Chivalrous Woman.
Huh. Interesting. That sounds like a better title, actually.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, wow, that is actually kind of tragic that the title got changed to, in the West to A Touch of Zen.
Huh. Interesting. So I am going to look forward to watching this for next week. So on Saturday, I'll be reviewing Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. Tuesday, I'll be reviewing Tokyo Story, directed by Yasujiro Ozu. And on Thursday, A Touch of Zen. Oh, man, I'm already disappointed by that title. Directed by King Hu. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Talk to you guys next time. Bye.